All right. Well, welcome everyone to Building Trust and Strengthening Partnerships for Community Impact. Thank you all for joining me today. My name is Lawrence Heiner. I'm the Director of Training and Technical Assistance at CalCAPA. CalCAPA is the California Community Action Partnership Association. We're the lead association for Region 9. And we are hopeful that today's session will provide you all a little bit more of an understanding of how to build trust with a lot of the stakeholders that we work with, ranging from clients to contract, like subrecipients to our colleagues. I mean, and even to extend this out further, you can use a lot of these tools to build trust with any community that you're participating in. Okay. So let's get things going here. If you have questions along the way, feel free to drop them in the chat. Eric is also here to help me keep an eye on the chat so we don't miss any questions. And you are very welcome to just come off of mute to ask any questions that you might have along the way. Okay. All right. So today, what are we trying to do here? We're learning about trust. So the first thing that we're going to do is define what trust means for the sake of our training here today. Trust can mean a lot of stuff, but we're going to focus in on a specific definition. We'll also want to know why trust matters for community action agencies and community-based organizations. So a lot of the reason why we wanted to have this session today had to do with the trust that we build between our agency and subcontractors that may work with the agency. Like I said, all of the things that we're going to talk about today have some bearing on your ability to develop a sense of trust with another individual or organization. Um, we'll describe some of the key players that we notice in our agencies and what their roles are in developing trust, particularly with other organizations. It's not all just us; like we are a team, so we all have some role to play in that. And then we'll explain a little bit more about what we mean by vulnerability-based trust. That's a very specific kind of angle to take on trust, and we'll explore that some. And then we'll look at overcoming some challenges and developing trust as we go. Right, so that's the general scope of what we have today. We can make this as specific as you need to. So just let me know a question if you've got something bubbling in the back of your mind and you want to talk through it. That's okay. All right. All right, to kick things off, we're going to get into the definition of trust and what trust means in a partnership. This is very much intended to be professional-based relationships. So there is an element of courtesy that we kind of infuse in a lot of these trust relationships. And that's not to suggest that we don't have friction sometimes. So building trust can help in a lot of those areas in easing our communication with our partners. I'd like to play a clip to kick things off here. It's a TEDx talk from James Davis, who's something of a regular guy. And I'm cutting off the front part of the story here because it just takes a while. But the setup is that he and his newlywed wife at the time are in the Grand Teton, I think, National Park or State Park. And they are deciding whether or not to go paragliding off a mountain with an instructor. Okay, so that's the setup. So I'll let James take it from here.
With. What we found in our research are there are three major drivers to trust. Three drivers, three reasons we trust. And the amazing thing is, it's our perception of that company, it's our perception of that other person that drives these drivers. The first of the three drivers is ability. Does that person, can that person do what they say they can do? Are they able to perform what they say they can perform? Do they have that ability? All right, there's John. All right, there he is. Does he have the ability? Well, he comes out and he's wearing that black helmet, kind of unshaven. He's got that jump off the mountain look. and And I got to tell you, I looked at him and I thought, you know, if he were wearing a pink helmet or a yellow helmet, I wouldn't believe it. But he's wearing a black helmet. He's got the swagger. He looks like he's jumped off a mountain before. And I said to him, I said, John, have you done this before? He says, yeah. He says, I've done it for 20 years. And I says, any deaths in that time? Any broken bones? And he said, no, 20 years, safe. Oh, John's got the ability. He's got the ability. And I began to believe in John. Now, here's something funny about ability. It's situation specific. Would I trust John to fix the engine in my car? John doesn't look like a guy that could fix my engine. I wouldn't trust John to fix the engine in my car. He could jump off a mountain. He had that ability. So ability is not generalizable. It's specific to the thing that you're trusting them to do. I would trust John to jump off a mountain, not fix my car. Okay? Ability. I will trust them if they can do what they say they will do. Okay? If they're able to do it. The second driver is benevolence. Do they care about me? Now here's John. I know he can jump off the mountain, but man, I'm telling you what, I saw those paragliders coming down and they were corkscrewing down, and I saw some pretty dang green people after they got off the mountain, and I knew John could cause me a lot of discomfort. You know, we'd survive, but I might not wish I'd survived. And so, does John care about me? Does John care? And it was interesting because we talked to him, and I began to feel like, yeah, we began to connect a little bit. We began to connect, and John, I felt like, cared about me. Now, here's the interesting thing here. If they care about me, it's not driven by their ego, okay? They don't care about me for their own gratification. They really care about me. And if they really care about me, I'm more apt to trust. A couple examples here of people that were known for their caring. Abraham Lincoln once said, to ease another's heartache is to forget one's own. He cared about people. A contemporary of Abraham Lincoln was Walt Whitman. And in their writings, they kind of blended each other's names very often in their writings. And Walt Whitman once said, you know, Abraham Lincoln is my man. But more importantly, I am Abraham Lincoln's man. He believed in the benevolence of Abraham Lincoln. And people that followed Abraham Lincoln did so. Yeah, he had ability. But they cared. They sensed that Abraham Lincoln cared about them. The amazing thing is, if it's all I have is ability and no benevolence, I'm an assassin. Assassins have lots of ability and they don't really care. Abraham Lincoln cared. Want an example of an assassin? Caligula. Caligula, raised by his uncle. His uncle wanted two people to share the emperor role in Rome. The first thing Caligula did was kill his cousin, kill the competition so that he was the sole leader. He drained the national treasury. One time he was in the Colosseum and they ran out of criminals to put with the lions. So he just grabbed some spectators and put them down there as well. He was not a man with a lot of benevolence. People feared him. As a result, you couldn't trust him. You couldn't trust him. Ability and benevolence drive your willingness to take risks. But there's one more factor. That factor is integrity. Integrity is having a set of values that other people agree with. You live by those values, and other people agree with those values. Now let's go back to Adolf Hitler. If you know the history of Adolf Hitler in the 1930s served a little time in jail. And while he was in jail, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf, My Struggle. In that book, Adolf Hitler laid out his values, his belief system. Now, most of us wouldn't agree with those values and that belief system. Believe me, that book was a bestseller in Nazi Germany. And there were people that believed in his values. They believed he had integrity. And believe me, Adolf, he lived his values. We wouldn't believe in his values, and so we wouldn't trust Hitler. But there were people that did. Integrity means I have a set of values, I live those values, and you trust me because of those values, and you believe in those values. In other words, if you say you're going to be there, you're going to be there. If you say you're going to be honest, you're honest. If you say you're going to be trustworthy, courteous, you will be, and you agree with it. Not driven by ego, it's real. 3 factors then drive trust. Thomas More was known for his integrity. He was known for his integrity. He once said, "We speak of principles, but if the weather turns nasty, you up your anchor and move to where the weather is more calm and the fishing is better." Thomas More lived his principles. If you go to the Tower of London, there's a small church in the back corner, and Thomas More's body is in the floor of that church somewhere. He stood up against the King of England because he didn't agree with the King of England. And while everybody else changed their values to match the king, Thomas More did not. He stood by his values. He gave his life for his values and his principles. Thomas More was a guy you could believe. He lived his values. Thomas More could be trusted because he lived his values. The bottom line, 3 factors. 3 factors drive trust. Yeah, there's John again. I'm not finished with him. 3 factors drive trust: ability, benevolence, and integrity. And it's your perception. It's your perception. And there's John, and there I am. Am I going to jump from the mountain? Am I going to jump from the mountain? Unconsciously, I'm thinking ability, benevolence, and integrity. Did I jump? Yeah, I jumped. I jumped. Yeah, it was great. I survived. I don't know that I'd have jumped if I couldn't believe him. If I wouldn't have believed him, if I wouldn't have trusted him, I don't know whether I could have jumped. As importantly, my fiance jumped. We jumped together. And it was phenomenal. If you want to improve your relationships, if you want to reduce your friction, if you want to improve people's perception of your trustworthiness, build their perception of your ability, benevolence, and integrity. And you will build trust. And believe me, we will have a happier society. Thank you.
All right. Wow, that was pretty cool, huh? So that guy gives me like Steve Martin vibes a little bit, you know? And I chose that video very specifically. I've seen a lot of videos on trust now. They talk about a lot of the common elements of what you would expect to build in trust. And James Davis goes into a little bit of that here, but he really focused on these 3 areas of ability, benevolence, and integrity. And his examples, I thought, were very telling, especially in that developing trust really has little to do with good or evil, right? It has little to do with right and wrong, but it does have to do with your ability to believe that someone else is going to do what they say that they're going to do, that you believe that they can do that, and that they will continue to do that out of a sense of benevolence, meaning that their effort is put forward because that's something that they believe in, right? And so there's a common belief structure there. So it's very interesting from my perspective to look at that, and then to see in our world how it is that we engender a sense of trust when we are interacting with all of the partners that we work with on a regular basis. So when we look at the idea of ability, you know, we need to demonstrate to our partners that we have some level of ability, that we have a benevolent attitude toward the work that we're doing, and that we operate through a sense of integrity. So, you know, particularly looking at operational, you know, standard operating procedures and that sort of thing, abiding by those is integrity in a way. And it helps folks to not just develop a sense of trust with you individually, but that the organization is trustworthy at that point. Right. Okay. Any thoughts here or from the video? Can open up if you've got any comments that you'd like to make or any observations so far. Eric?
Yeah, just briefly, I thought that was pretty neat for a couple of reasons. One is I just went skydiving for the first time, as you know, Lawrence. So for me, I could, looking back, I really felt comfortable, and that was probably at least half the reason I really enjoyed my experience. But yeah, the instructor definitely, I trusted his ability. He seemed benevolent enough, at least was to me, and yeah, had plenty of experience, plenty of integrity. So that was neat to see the speaker roll that out and introduce that framework, and just then internalizing that and reflecting on how I may exhibit those values or maybe lacking in some departments. So yeah, thank you for sharing that video. I found it extremely helpful and very insightful.
Hey, cool, Eric. Thank you. I nearly forgot how connected that video was to your recent experience, but thank you for sharing that. All right. So this is sort of the how to develop trust, right? The next thing I'd like to look at is more of why it is that we develop trust. We'll spend a little time here because why folks trust us is pretty important and not always as obvious as it seems. I think that we're used to demonstrating a level of trust, especially if you work with clients, that there's a sense of trust there when you're working with clients. When you're not working with clients, let's say that your role is more like contract management or procurement or something that deals more directly with another organization. And a lot of these other items start to come into play. And for those of you that are fresh to community action, these elements that we're looking at now dip into our performance management structure, right? So we look at outcomes very closely, and we want to know that when we are working with another organization, that when they say that they're able to achieve some kind of change in the world, that they can do that, and that those are demonstrated through outcomes, and that we can trust that that organization can provide the outcomes that we're looking for. That could be social services if we've got groups that are going out to perform services with the public. That's one thing. It could be that we're looking for outcomes internally at our agency. So say it's maybe a vendor relationship, and we need to trust that our vendor is going to supply us with the things that we are expecting them to supply us with. All right. Uh, Beyond outcomes, we also look at reports. Okay. And especially in contract relationships, as you all well know, reports are super important. I mean, you may not get paid if you don't have a report associated with the activity that you're doing. But we want to be able to trust what's in the reports, right? So when someone sends us a report, we want to be able to trust that those figures we can include with our own figures and match them up and roll them up into our own reporting. It could also mean that we are leveraging others' reports as maybe part of our needs assessment or something like that. That's going to inform our decisions moving forward. So we need to be able to trust that the reports that are being generated through our partners are solid and valid. And then another area can be that procurement. So when either we're looking for a vendor internally to satisfy some kind of capacity building inside our agency, or if it is some kind of a procurement that's more externally focused, where we're hiring another organization to do work on our behalf. You can imagine that trust is also extremely important in order to develop a sense of understanding, and I was going to say sense of trust, but I mean, really, you want to be able to predict that when you're operating with a trusted vendor, they're going to do what they say that they're going to do, and it starts to reflect on your agency's reputation in the community, right? So for better or worse, okay, based on those relationships. So it's heavy impact, right? Developing a sense of trust extends far beyond just that interaction. It becomes emblematic of our agency's ability to develop trust, and to a greater, lesser degree, individually, our ability to establish that level of trust with the other person who's representing that partner. So images can sometimes be more telling. So when we're thinking about low trust with our with any partners, that can start to build a sense that, I mean, when you don't trust that partner, that there are negative undercurrents that could affect us badly, right? We don't want to see something happen with our agency because we didn't trust the partner, right? So if there's low trust, then there's going to be animosity between us. Um, High trust, on the other hand, and this image may catch you sideways, like, why did Lawrence put that, caution avalanche? Well, I go skiing, snowboarding, really. And if I saw this sign, right, the first thing that I would do is trust that it's there for a reason. There were people ahead of me who inspected this area or know from history that this is an avalanche area and you should probably not go back there. So if I trust, the organizations that post those kinds of warnings, I'm not going to go back there, right? It's a social service. I don't need to know the individuals, right? But I need to know that that forestry service or maybe the crew that runs a particular like ski resort, that they are trustworthy when they post those things, that it's valid and I should pay attention. Okay. All right. Cool. Now in this next section, you may start to see yourself in this journey toward developing trust with partners. This is not a complete list here, but some of the roles that can be impacted in our agency and associations at our agency level. We'll kind of run the gamut here. So, it starts with our leaders of the organization. If you have an executive director, CEO, even a leadership team that could include like a chief operating officer or chief financial officer, those folks are high visibility for the organization, and a lot of the trust that people feel toward the organization stems from their trust in those individuals. Right, so they have a very high profile impact on an organization's trustworthiness um, in general. Now, that's not everyone's experience with the organization, right? Some people never talk to the leaders of the organization. They're going to talk to somebody more appropriate to their role in the business that they're in. So, for instance, with finance directors. Okay. If I'm a finance director, I'm establishing relationships maybe with vendors, like technical vendors. I'm also looking at any financial impact with our agency. So that could be contracting with our funders. That could be looking for additional funders. That could be working with the board in ways, right? So I'm developing a lot of relationships even as a finance director, but I'm representing now the finances of my organization, and my personality now has an impact. So now I'm if as a finance director, I establish a very positive relationship with a vendor, they're going to in turn have a positive relationship, or excuse me, a positive image of the agency that I'm working with, right? And then the contrary is also true. Um, Contract managers, this is going to be all day long. Are any of you that are on the call right now, is your primary role to do contract management with vendors or with subcon or like subrecipients of grant funding, anything like that? Not a lot, but I imagine on the recording we probably have a few. But with contract, when you're managing contracts, sometimes the interactions that you're having are really not uh, they may not be face to face. They may be more virtual, is what I'm getting at, right? So when you're uh, shoot. um, when you're interacting with folks and you're maybe it's only through email, may not even have an opportunity for a phone call. It could be only through the reports themselves or notes generated in a system. So even at that level, there's still opportunities to demonstrate trust. And you think about things like your ability or in reliability. So, that reporting is accurate or documents that are sent back and forth are edited well, or they go in without errors. That can go a long way in developing trust with the partner. We'll find that planners have to develop a huge set. There, um, in planning, a lot of the trust that's developed is external from the agency, besides the internal awareness that needs to be there of everything that's going on at an agency in order to make plans, or even if it's focused at a departmental level, that the folks in the department trust the planner. So when they're asking questions, they receive accurate information. The planners are also looking externally at I'm thinking specifically of needs assessment time. Right now, a lot of agencies are going through community needs assessments, and that happens every few years, right? So, as planners are developing a sense of trust with their communities, things like town halls and other sorts of um, feedback campaigns, that especially face-to-face feedback campaigns. Um, really rely on the planners being able to connect and develop a sense of trust with the community and with community leaders, right? Among others. So the planners definitely have that in their wheelhouse. And then administrative staff, um, because they are a lot of times the folks that interact with external partners on a regular basis. Admin staff in general is good to have an awareness of how you're developing trust or not when communicating externally from the organization. I mean, internally is important as well, just to move things along in general workflow. But looking externally, admin staff is frequently in contact with other, like working layers of an organization. So we're interacting with other roles all the time. Okay, I'll pause here because I want to hear from you all too. So, in your role in your organization, how do you feel that you have a responsibility to develop a sense of trust, either internally or externally or some other way?
Lawrence, I think it is really important to, like how you said earlier, do as you say. So if I say I'm going to follow up on something, whether it take me a couple of minutes or a couple of days to get that information, I want to make sure that I do follow up, because there's nothing worse than to get a email saying, I'm waiting on your response. So I think that's really important. And I know that knowledge is very important to me. So that was something I struggled with. I kept feeling like I'm still learning. How can I teach somebody this when I'm still learning? So that it's okay to say, I need to check on this and get back with you. So that's something that I struggle with also, but definitely I would have to say follow-up is very important.
Yeah, I like the way that you put that. Even a sense of transparency or humility, involved. I think that goes a very, very long way. And knowing that you know what your next step is going to be, I think that also helps a lot. So thank you for sharing that.
Hannah with Gila County, and I really resonate with that. Just because having quite a bit of also like just hospitality or general customer service or retail even. You know, you don't want to be that sleazy car salesman. You want to be the expert that they can trust. When you're learning something freshly, I really resonate with that. Not trying to be like, oh, I don't know that answer and look bad or, you know, mislead or anything, but really taking the time to be like, you know, hey, we are going to workshop that together and we're going to come around to a solution or an answer, even if it's not immediately, you know, but very much agree with being the communicative side of, you know, okay, let me look into that. Let me take it in it. I'll get back to you and really following through with that too. I agree.
Nice. Really, yeah, I like that sense of um, problem solving. Like combined problem solving can build that sense of trust pretty quickly. Very cool. Anyone else?
I'm with the city of Glendale. I find myself just telling people, I don't have an answer for you right now, but we are gonna take care of this. You know what I mean? Like letting them know like this is something that's being addressed. I just don't have an answer of how yet.
Yeah,
So
got you.
I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're hearing that a lot. I think it's safe. It's a safe response. Eric.
Yeah, I think one thing too that's really important in my experience is just showing that you care. Like even, we're talking about maybe you're a beginner, perhaps you don't have the most resources or the most expertise, but just showing the fact that you're invested and that you're willing to put in the effort to learn and get back to them, or if the context is different and you have an opportunity to learn more about their role or their needs or their organization and clients, that also, in my experience, builds trust very quickly.
All right. Well, everyone's comments are really teeing up this next slide here because we're we can talk in general about um, how it is that we build and maintain trust. I mean, loosely, and you've all brought up a few of these already. Um, uh, Listening actively, I mean, you really can't do all the things that you were all just talking about without really listening to our partners to understand what the challenges are, right? Like we don't want to make assumptions. Solving the wrong problem doesn't do anybody any good. Uh, Not right away, anyway. Um, Sharing information early is also a thing. So I heard several of you commenting on, as soon as you know that you don't know, that's a great time to let that other person know that we've got at least a challenge that we can solve before we can move forward. But sharing that information as soon as we know or as early as is practical. It's a really good way of building that trust. Admitting mistakes is also key. This is a sense of humility. But when there is an error, that we come forward with it more quickly. If you're caught in an error, it's a lot more difficult for people to trust you than when you say, yes, oh, I know, I made a mistake, and then taking steps to correct that, would be beyond that. But admitting to it quickly does help with the other person knowing that they can trust that you would do that. Like when you notice something. Inviting feedback is another trust mechanism. We do that a lot at our association because we want other folks to know that we respect their feedback. I would add to this beyond inviting feedback, and this is something that I hear over and over and over, is to demonstrate that you used feedback. Okay, so it's one thing to invite the feedback. It's another to say, this is how we're using your feedback, right? Or um, if you roll something out, acknowledging the feedback that you've used to make it better or something like that, right? So talking about your feedback. Since I talked about community needs assessments already, that's a great way of demonstrating to people who participated in the needs assessment process, especially the surveying or focus groups and that sort of thing, that they get a copy or in some way are informed of the outcome of their participation. It goes a long way, right? In them participating again in the future. Okay. And then celebrating shared wins is a good way. I heard you all talking about that too. So being able to look a partner in the eye and high five them and acknowledge that everything went well absolutely develops trust. Good to see that. Okay, so this is another opportunity, I think, for us to invite a little bit of feedback from you all. A few of the key groups that we considered would be important to develop trust with would be folks like community leaders, especially if you're in a leadership role, but not necessarily if you have access to community leaders. Our relationships with them help to build trust with our organizations. Elected officials would probably be a more advanced version of that same thought. Local communities are developing trust with local communities is probably more important now than ever. It's always been important for community action to develop trust with local communities. As we look into hard to reach populations as another way of inviting better techniques to develop a sense of trust with communities. I heard a great story from another organization in the network that was trying to develop relationships as a community action agency with a local Native American Indian tribe that was within their geographic kind of territory, but was not otherwise funded for CSBG. So they tried a lot of different communication methods to get in touch with the tribal community, but were unsuccessful in developing a sense of trust until one of the leaders of the agency drafted a letter in the native language of that community and sent it off to its leaders. And upon receiving that and seeing the effort that was made to connect using, a more appropriate language, just to show that there was an effort there, was enough for that tribe to develop a sense of trust with that agency, and they advanced that. That agency also wound up hiring a direct liaison to that community and furthered that sense of trust by doing that. So just as one example of how that can play out in real life, that developing trust with communities where you did not have trust before absolutely can lead to better outcomes for everyone. And then, of course, other CBO partners. So I'd like to pause here and just knowing, we're talking about building a sense of trust with other groups. Does anyone have an experience they'd like to share about either your organization now or another one where you developed a sense of trust that led to something more fruitful down the road?
I'll share something.
All right.
We do a program with the city of Glendale where we like adopt a family that received emergency assistance within the last year. And this isn't necessarily like with a partner, but one of the people that we picked didn't speak English, didn't speak Spanish, and didn't speak um, any of the other languages really that we understood or had a translator for. So we sent it out to find somebody that could interpret the language. So then eventually, once we figured out what language it was, we were able to help them and give them gifts for the holidays.
Oh, that's very cool. That's a nice outcome to that. Yeah. Yeah, the language barrier is pretty significant.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm.
Very good.
We actually work with the Department of Economic Security a lot here in Arizona. They have a program that they trained us on so that we could help our clients apply for assistance. So because the training was great and there's a monthly a focus group to get feedback from us about how the program was rolling out and what were the issues that we were having. But because of the constant communication and because they knew the program so well, they had answers for all our questions and all the roadblocks and difficulties we were having. um you know uh I for one was able to really feel like I could trust them and build on that trust, because and then transfer the knowledge that they gave us to make us be trustworthy to our clients, because we knew what we were doing and we knew how to work the program. And then because there was trust between us and the partners with Department of Economic Security, it was so easy if there was something that we needed quickly. We need help quickly with a certain case or a certain client that was needed the assistance more quickly. They responded very in a very timely manner to us. And so it was a benefit to me, but more than that, it was a benefit to the client, because there was trust in communication and integrity in knowing that they knew the answers to our questions.
Hey, Diana, that's a great example of the organizations working well together to develop that
Yeah.
sense of trust with the client. I love that. That's a great story.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Okay.
Lawrence,
So
real quick.
yes, yeah, go for it.
I've got kind of I think a unique twist on this. So as you know, I covered San Diego HHSA's success with an SMS text initiative. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because the reason the primary reason that was a success was because of trust. So for those in attendance that may not be familiar, maybe didn't see the video we published, essentially the San Diego HHSA, who is a CSBG recipient, for their community needs assessment, because they're in local government, we're able to access a list of essentially CalFresh recipients and their text information. And because those recipients were already receiving texts through CalFresh, it was a recognized number, recognized and trusted source. When San Diego HHSA sent out their community needs assessment to all of these clients, that trust was already there. So it yielded and resulted in about 10,000 additional community needs assessment completions or surveys filled out. So once again, just underscoring the importance of that trust.
Yeah, Eric, that's a great example of how developing that trust can then lead to others, trusting a new thing because they already trust the organization. That's really, really wonderful. And that's, I think, what we all really want, right? We just want folks that they recognize that it's coming from a trusted organization. Another great way of building it. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so all of our interactions are opportunities, I think, to instill trust. It also brings up, Eric, that it also brings up a concern that we can all have and share to protect the level of trust that we build with the community. So you don't want to do anything that would endanger that sense of trust. There are things that can happen that can quickly destroy trust between partnerships, and sometimes can be difficult to mend. So we'd want to avoid those. But that's the reason why, right? Like we do a lot of work to build this trust, especially with the community. We don't want to see it go away because it's super valuable. Some of those things that can challenge trust, particularly if we take our eye off the ball, so to speak. Things like power imbalances. So if all of a sudden you have more control in a relationship and leverage it without talking through, that power dynamic, that can put somebody on their heels very, very quickly, right? And destroy a sense of trust. There's also smaller versions of that that can happen internally, like if a member of a team gets promoted to be the supervisor of the team, for instance, this can be a situation where there's a new power imbalance, and folks have to develop a new sense of trust with that person as a leader and not just as a colleague, right? So there's little things like that that can tip a previously trusting relationship, tip it over a little. Miscommunication almost goes without saying. How many times have you heard, when somebody sends the wrong email, didn't mean to send an email, sent a nasty email, like whatever, and that just damages trust so badly. So miscommunications are, hmm, they're, we do our best to be in control of the communications that go out. It's also important to be cognizant of all the communications that go out, even when you don't intend them to. So even something as simple as, this is going to be funny because we're all on a Zoom call, but let's say that you're on a Zoom meeting with somebody, one-on-one even, and you get distracted and you're looking away for a while and not paying attention to them. That can damage the sense of trust that they have with you, even if it was innocent, if they don't know why you were looking away, right? So the body language is a form of communication that we want to be aware of. That's one of like many ways that we communicate without necessarily intending it. And we just want to be careful that we're not damaging a sense of trust with somebody as we interact with folks. Right? Procurement pressures are also interesting. This can be like it's not supposed to happen this way, but sometimes you'll get pressured by leaders of an organization to try to procure a particular um, group because there's an existing relationship or that kind of thing. We learn about this in risk management and how to avoid conflicts of interest. So in procurement, there can be these pressures, right? Like I've developed a sense of trust with this group, so I want to use them. Well, okay, that's a good reason to keep them on the list, but it doesn't mean that they're going to get the contract. Make sense? So, it's important for us to pay attention to that because it speaks to the integrity of the organization. We hear it in the news when that goes sideways, right? So we don't want to be in the news for procurement going sideways because that usually means that there's some level of litigation going on. So we'll be careful with procurement. And then staff turnover can also have um, kind of foreseen and unforeseen trust challenges, right? Particularly if you've got folks in your organization that have personal relationships, right? That connect partners, and if one of those people go away, right, and no longer in the picture, then you have to go back to the drawing board a little bit to develop a sense of trust with that group, and that can absolutely look like board members having interactions with the community, and if a board member turns over out of the board and we no longer have that connection to the community, it may cause challenges for the organization moving forward simply because we don't have that level of trust built just yet, right? Or maybe we relied on that. I think we all talked about that a little bit here, that once you do develop a sense of trust, that you can kind of skip ahead a little bit. Like you've already laid the groundwork to say yes to more things. And if those folks aren't available anymore, don't have that memory, of the relationship, then well, you got to rebuild it, right? You got to go back to those trust building techniques. So these four things and others can cause challenges to trust. Does anybody in our couple of minutes that we have left have any examples of when that's gone sideways for you? Or a story about it, not necessarily just you.
I want to say something just real quick.
Sure, go for
A
it.
recent conversation I had with someone, and I've always been really sensitive to this, but I was speaking to them and opening up about like personal things. And as I was talking to them, they were looking around and breaking eye contact. So you said something about that earlier, and it kind of triggered me and reminded me like how frustrating that was because I felt like they ultimately weren't listening or didn't care. Of course, that's an inner story. Who knows how much of that was true, but it did make me feel that way. It was interesting.
That's true. Hey, and thank you for bringing that up too. Trust is a feeling after all. I mean, it's an emotional response, but it's there for a reason. So thank you for painting that picture for us, Eric. Okay. Well, hopefully things do go sideways. You've got a couple of tips in any case on remembering how to build those trusting relationships. It sounds like we're not so much learning new things as much as ordering them in another way, to kind of build trust with our partners. Okay, couple ideas left. Um, Outcomes, we talked a little bit about the benefits here, but some of those outcomes going to be better reports. So, when we look at those reporting relationships, you'll see better reports. You'll have higher performance. I mean, kind of goes without saying. Um, and for those that are just about to jump off the call, I'm going to drop our feedback link into the chat in case you need to bail on us early. I like our feedback. We do see higher performance when there is more trust. Going to be less stress. I've heard a few folks talk about that already in conversation here. It just reduces the amount of stress in the relationship. And then you can have longer term collaborations, build on trust, which is wonderful, and bringing in more folks into that picture. A little like the story that we heard on connecting or another agency into a client situation. That's great. Okay. All right. So today, what we went through was developing vulnerability-based trust with partners. And we didn't speak on that word vulnerability a whole lot, but as you were describing how you go about building trust, it is absolutely that. It is that being willing to let folks know when things are not going right. That is absolutely the foundation of vulnerability-based trust, so that we know how to make things right moving forward. Understanding why trust matters between our agency and other organizations is big. We can recognize how the different roles that we're in build trust for the organization and with our partners. We'll realize the benefits of being vulnerable with our partners. So understanding that when we are good, trusting partners, that things move more smoothly. And then to overcome challenges in cultivating trust. We looked through a couple of those items there. So um, I'd like to thank you all for taking a little bit of time out of your day to learn a little bit more about how to develop trust with partners. If you could do us a favor and let us know how this session worked for you, and if you'd like to see additional stuff from Cal Kappa, we'll take that feedback as well. So please go ahead and use that QR code. Is the same as that link that I dropped in the chat. So whatever works best for you, we love your feedback. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thanks, Antonia.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See everybody.